Welcome back to ARC Tutorials. This is Top 50 Agile Interview Questions with Answers Part 2. I hope you have checked out the Part 1. If not, please do so. This is a continuity in the series. You can get this entire PPT as ebook or PDF at arctutorials.gumroad.com for free. Make sure to grab your copy. Alright, so let's get started. So today's first question is, what is Scrum of Scrums? When you work in a large team at a big enterprise, chances are that you will work with multiple teams, or also called as Scrum teams. Now, let's say there are 7 teams that are working on a project, and each team has 7 members. It's very difficult to coordinate between these teams, or to share data, or to come to an agreement between the data contracts or the integration aspects. That's where they will have a separate meeting with all the team leads or the Scrum leads, and then that meeting is called Scrum of Scrums. So in a Scrum of Scrums, there will be an ambassador to represent your particular team in that particular meeting. The points that are discussed in the meeting are: how are the teams progressing since the last meeting? Is there any task that needs to be done before the next meeting? Are there any dependencies between different teams? If yes, how do we resolve them? So think of it this as a very important meeting or a ceremony where ambassadors from each team will get together, discuss the progress, blockers, dependencies, and any resolutions that needs to be done. So that is what is Scrum of Scrums. Now the next one is define epic, stories, tasks, and bugs. This is usually asked to check your understanding of basic understanding of what these different aspects are, right? So the way you should answer is: an epic is a software feature, functionality defined by a customer. Now this goes in as part of the product backlog, right? Now when you break down the epics, they become user stories. So what are user stories? When you break down an epic or a feature into smaller doable stories, those becomes your user stories. Now those can be delivered in a certain sprint. So if you have if you have one epic, let's say it's called authentication, you break down user stories like user should be able to log in, should be able to do validation, and when entered wrong data, it should give error message. These are all user stories. Now when you break down the user stories further, it becomes a task. Now what is a task? Task is to implement the UI, make a HTTP call, implement the CSS. So those becomes your task. Now what is a defect or a bug? Now the bugs are the tickets that are created when functionality is not working as expected or as per the requirements. Right, so that's pretty simple, straightforward. Make sure that you get all the 4 definitions of these 4 aspects really well, understand them. When you are asked in an interview, please do explain with an example like how I told you. The next is, what is spike and zero sprint in Agile? So let's talk about spike first. So spike usually refers to a large or a complex user story which has lot of unknowns, right? So when you don't know certain aspect, let's say for example which library to use for streaming, that's an example you can give. Now we will break it down as a spike. That means the one of the development team member or multiple members would do exploration, do prototyping, do research, R&D about the different libraries available, which suits our requirement and stuff like that, or maybe create a dirty POC to solve this or to show the capability. So spike is nothing but a very large unknown kind of a functionality which is broken down, and we do a quick POC R&D to find what are the use cases, whether it fits our requirement or not. Zero sprint is generally refers to the first step or the pre-preparation step that comes just before the first sprint. Before you kickstart your project into sprint 1, you would have the sprint 0. Now this sprint is mainly used for setting up development environments, requesting accesses, getting in laptops, getting network setup, etc. or licensing, preparing backlog, those things. So remember, spike means whenever you have a story which has unknown or you're not sure, you're not confident of the outcome, you do a small R&D, research, technical find outs, and maybe create a POC. Sprint 0 refers to a sprint before the first sprint, and it is done only once, which includes activities like environment setup, development, preparation, licensing, access setup, network setup, hardware, laptop, desktop, etc. What is the difference between agile methodology and traditional methodology of software development? Agile methodology is an iterative approach that is used to design complicated software. In this method, project teams are allowed to be more flexible and ensure that the final product is fulfilling to the customer's requirements. Using agile methodology, we develop customer-centric products and we deliver valuable or viable minimum viable product in shorter sprints. With with each iteration, we produce some increment to the product. The team collaborates with customers in each and every step throughout the process. Traditional software, whereas, uses a linear approach, which means you go through different phases sequentially. Like, for example, first you do the due diligence, you do the documentation, you come up with a blueprint architecture, then you design, then you develop, then you test, and the cycle continues. And this usually uh, is suitable if the project is say less complex or something like that. But if there is a lot of unknowns, you should definitely go for agile. If you know certainty, if there is a lot of documentation done, you can still consider traditional software development. The next is, what do you mean by the term velocity in agile? Velocity is basically a measurement unit that measures and calculates how much work an agile development team can successfully complete in a single sprint. So velocity, in short, you can say that it is the total number of story points that the agile development team can complete in a given sprint. So this technique is also used as a calibration tool that helps development teams to create accurate and efficient timelines, right? So when you want to work with some timelines, you need to have some gut feeling about some metrics that to go about. Velocity is one such. So for example, if you have five team members will work, let's say 6 hours per day, right? 5 6 are 30, so that is 30 hours per week. So now you can break down your stories and say how much story each time can take, or how many hours do you want to spend on those. So that way you get some kind of metrics. So velocity is one of that how many story points can a team achieve in a particular sprint. Now what do you mean by daily stand-up meeting? A daily stand-up meeting is a day-to-day meeting among which all the members of the agile team come together, they share their updates. Now, there are three important aspects to a daily stand-up meeting. We talk about what was done yesterday, what is planned for today, and are there any impediments or blockers that the team has. Each team member talks about these three aspects in daily stand-up. What did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? And do you have any blockers or impediments to do your work? That is what you discuss in daily stand-up. Now, what is incremental and iterative development? Iterative development is basically software development process where software development cycles or sprint and releases are repeated until the final product is obtained. So think of it like this. Whenever you hear the word iterative, get a word iteration in your brain, which means you will keep iterating till you get the final product done. Okay. Whereas incremental development is work is sliced into small increments. I'll give you an example. In a typical agile development product, you do iterative development, right? Which means today we will do login screen in this particular sprint. In next sprint, we are going to do forgot password, like that. So it is iterative. That means you keep implementing, right? In a login screen in this sprint, you're adding, say, a submit button. In the next sprint, you are going to add a HTTP call to that submit button. That is iterative development. Whereas incremental development, you say that in this sprint, we are going to complete the entire login functionality. That's incremental. In the next sprint, we will implement about create new user, right? So you're dividing the work based on pieces or portions. That is called incremental development. The next is what is pair programming, and talk about some of its benefits. So pair programming is a technique in which two programmers work as a team, where one programmer writes code, the other one reviews the algorithm or the logic or the code. They can switch their roles alternatively. Now, what are the benefits? When you're working on a complex piece of, say, software or an algorithm or something which is really tricky and requires much better understanding and a lot of use cases to be covered, it's better that you do pair programming. The benefits are you have the knowledge transfer is extremely smooth, as both the developers will discuss about the logic, the use cases, the negative part, the happy use cases, etc. The code quality is obviously better because there are two people writing code. The chances of mistakes, the chances of writing better code increases. By doing pair programming, you are reducing the risk of errors, and you're also improving better team collaboration and team dynamics. Now, the next question is what is a roadmap? A product roadmap, as the name suggests, is a powerful tool that describes how a product is likely to grow over time. It's a holistic view of product features that create the product vision, right? So think of this way. Whenever you talk about a roadmap, it's just nothing but it's the blueprint, it's the plan of how the features are divided, when will they be delivering, what are we trying to achieve, what are the problems we may come across, and how are we going to solve them. So the entire roadmap is owned by product manager. Product manager will say that I want to release the entire authentication system by November. So that's the roadmap. The next set of features will go in by February. The next will go in by June. So this structure, this entire roadmap is called a product roadmap that you lay out with each features, putting a timeline to it as to when you want the development to be done, when you want the features to be released. That is called product roadmap. The next question is what are burn up and burn down charts in Agile? Burn up chart is a type of chart that is used to display or represent the amount of work that has been completed and the total amount of work for a sprint or an iteration. Okay. Now burn down chart represents the opposite. That means it will show how much work is remaining. Okay. So think of these two things. They will definitely ask you in an interview. Burn up chart is how much work has been completed against the total number of work planned. Okay. Burn down chart means how much work is remaining to be completed in the project. The burn up chart usually goes diagonally upwards. Burn down chart will always come down. Whenever you close a user story, you would see a dot and the line would come down. An ideal chart of burn down should look diagonally down, not upwards. A burn up chart should go progressively slowly towards upwards towards diagonally. Remember these two things, they are really critical. They always ask you in interviews. Alright, so that's for today's episode. I'll continue the series in next episode, which is part 3. Make sure you get this PPT as ebook for free at arctutorials.gumroad.com. If you have any questions, please do write to me at surya.aradhya@gmail.com. Thank you so much again for joining. Please don't forget to subscribe. Ask me your doubts in the comment section. Thank you again for joining. See you in the next part.